But let's listen to some of the politicians and senior military people talking, and we'll kick off here with David Cameron.
Last night, 4 RAF Typhoons took part in military action together with the Americans to further degrade the Houthi capacity to carry out these attacks on shipping in the Red Sea. What the Houthis are doing is unacceptable, it's illegal, and it's threatening the freedom of navigation. That's why we've taken the action. Alongside that action is a whole set of measures we'll be taking, including sanctions and other pressure to put on the Houthis, combined, of course, with the action the Royal Navy is taking with others in the Red Sea. And we'll be building the strongest coalition of support to back the steps that we've been taken.
Well, there we are, truly horrible. I wonder how many people remember Cameron speaking as Prime Minister, putting on his very posh, very serious voice as he tells the audience and the world what is actually happening. Those nasty Houthis, of course, we, United Kingdom, the US, NATO, we have not done anything out of the ordinary. All of this trouble has simply come out of nowhere. But there he is on the world stage saying what he and the British military are going to do about it. All of this, of course, is a smokescreen and a lie, because at the moment, Britain's military are in parlous situation with a lack of equipment and men. And, well, let's hear some further comment from a retired Colonel, Tim Collins.
You first came to prominence, obviously, as a military leader. The biggest challenge that you might face, were you still in the forces today, would be what's happening in the eastern border of NATO, Russia. Do you think that we are ready, fit to play our part in the defence of Europe?
We are, in this country, absolutely not ready. Our military is a shadow of itself. Two of our biggest assets, the 2 aircraft carriers, are tied up alongside in Portsmouth when we have a crisis in the Red Sea.
So it gets interesting when we hear Cameron speaking, and then we get the reality of the situation about the UK armed forces. The carriers can't operate in the Red Sea. We simply can't get them out there. We haven't got the supply and the support ships. And also the army is getting smaller and less effective, less credible by the day. So that retired colonel pointing it out. But let's go to the boss and General Sanders himself.
General Sanders has made no secret of the fact he thinks the British Army is too small. The current Conservative government has cut it to its smallest size in more than 300 years. And General Sanders made the point that over the last 30 years, the British Army has halved in size. He's made the point that he sees the current generation of soldiers as a pre-war generation.
So we're in a pre-war generation, but by some strange event, the armed forces have got smaller and smaller. Many of the media reports are talking about the British Army shrinking, as if it had been put on the wrong wash cycle in the washing machine. But the reality is deliberate, calculated policy has been destroying Britain's military to make it smaller, less effective, and of course weakening it with the woke agenda. So let's listen to General Sir Patrick Sanders talking about future soldier and something he's discovered.
Well, future soldier is a response to the strategic context we're in. And that was captured, I think, pretty well in the integrated review in 2021. But of course, what we've had since then is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And so although we characterised Russia as a threat, I think the threat, the speed at which that's accelerated towards us has taken everyone by surprise. And so what we've done is to adapt at real pace what Future Soldier set out, because we know that we could be required to fight, and certainly we need to be able to deter the threats in Europe this decade. Future Soldier is incredibly exciting. So at its heart, it's the most radical transformation of the British Army that I've experienced in the 40 years that I've been in uniform. This is an incredibly exciting time to be joining the army, and if you're in the army now, you join now, the army you join will look radically different in the course of the next 6 or 7 years. And just to give you a sense of the pace of that, we've now got a really clear sense of our purpose. So the army's purpose is to fight and win wars on land.
Well, Alex, I'm going to ask you for a little bit of help here, because by the time we got to that final statement, he's been in the army for 40 years, but apparently it's only now, recently, that he's understood what the purpose of the army was. I want to say that this man does not have the mental acumen to do the job he's doing, but there's something else. It is like he has the mind of a child. He's trying to tell us that with all of the intelligence systems in UK and the West, we didn't see the threat from the Russians. And oh my goodness, now we've got a problem because we don't have an army capable of doing anything effective in the field overseas. But he's only just learned the purpose of why we have an army. What's your explanation for the mindset of this man?
Brain scramble of some kind. I'm glad you gave me a bit of a bridge there before bringing the camera onto me, because I had to suppress quite a hearty laugh at that last sentence. As usual, I go for linguistic analysis. I don't think that somebody as well-bred as Sir Patrick really speaks as casually and sloppily as that, with the dropped consonants between vowels. People might for short call it American speech, where of course there's no association of register with it. But in Britain, certainly in his upbringing, that would have been a no-go for anyone of class and breeding. So I think he is deliberately, like Tony Blair in his early years of premiership, when he pretended to pronounce football as football. I think what he's doing here is showing that he's a man of the people and putting things in oversimplified terms. That looking up, and if I'm not mistaken, to the right as well, suggests to me a kind of panic or brain freeze moment.
Well, if we've got the senior man having brain freezes, I don't have any confidence in his ability to defend the nation. But the second point I want to make is that history shows us a deliberate policy to destroy Britain's military. And the UK column has been warning and warning over a great many years on this issue. So let's have a look at some previous reports. This one is up to date. So this is Sky News. RAF jets flying 3,000 miles for Houthi strikes as flagship aircraft carriers remain in the UK. And we've talked about that. It's partly manning and partly the support ships. Here's the Mail. Aircraft carrier fiasco as the UK refuses to deploy either of its 3.5 billion warships to help tackle Yemen's Houthis. And then we can go back here and have a look at old reports. RAF cuts could make Britain's airspace vulnerable to attack. Competition to give retired HMS Illustrious a new home. Here's HMS Ark Royals being cut up in a Turkish scrapyard. Scrapping of the RAF Nimrods. British Army cuts are one hell of a risk after Crimea, says General. And we said at the time, to destroy Britain, vote Conservative 2015. So none of this is accidental. This was planned policy by the political parties, Labour in on it as well, but other things going on, the wokeness of the military. And this was army fitness tests being rewritten to make sure the women could cope with what was happening. But if you look at the reality everywhere, women are coming into front line of the military. That is a man lost to the front line, and that is a weakening of the military. That may be contentious with some of our women audience today, but that is the harsh reality of it. Meanwhile, we've got big money for jobs which are more akin to sitting in an office than being in uniform for an army. So looking for a new career. Cybersecurity. Here we've got Forces TV from 2016 talking about the sell-off of mod assets in order to build homes, 10 military sites to be sold for 7,000 homes. And apparently every pound we make by disposing of excess land will be reinvested into a defence budget that keeps Britain safe. So that's the reality, planned destruction. Let's very quickly have a look at what Boris Johnson had to say to the idea of recruiting youngsters to fight the Russians.
Sir, Lance Corporal Johnson reporting for duty and responding to the appeal from General Sanders for a citizen army and encouraging young people across the country to think of the attractions, advantages of some kind of military training or service. Because at the moment they think it's either uncool or unethical, or perhaps they're not following General Sanders, they're following Colonel Sanders. To find out what we need to do about it, read my column in the Daily Mail.
So I just say to the audience, I have to include myself. I wasn't able to stop him, but we allowed this person to become a politician who ultimately destroyed any peace between Ukraine and the Russians. And this is the idiot now talking to the public on the lines of getting young people involved to die on the battlefield. Well, I'll just reiterate what Alex has shown, which is that the Telegraph here, why it's maybe too late for the West to avoid war. And on the right, we've got Peter Hitchens, who quite rightly is pointing out we need to do something to stop this madness. But I'm going to say even Peter Hitchens doesn't seem able to put the pieces together of what we're faced with. And there's a little video clip here from a US man who's now living in the Donbass warning us. And I think this is a very, very pertinent track, which many people should pay attention to. He tells us what is coming. Let's have a listen.
You know, I've been saying for 10 years that people in the United States should take a lesson from what's happened in Ukraine and understand that, you know, what the U.S., who controls the Ukrainian government, has done to Ukraine, destroyed the economy, you know, caused the death of millions of their citizens, you know, made them, you know, a pariah and a disgrace on the world political stage. All these things that they have done in Ukraine, and I've been telling people in America this for 10 years now. You know, what the U.S. government and the people who own and control the U.S. government and the European governments, what they have done to people in other countries around the world, they will do to their own citizens too.
So a very simple but very powerful statement. I'm just going to reinforce it as fast as I can by saying, just have a look back at what was happening. Here's 2013, and we have Prince Charles, who said he's going to be working with David Cameron, Ed Miliband and Nick Clegg to recruit an army of 2 million to save a lost generation, a so-called community army. If we have a look at what David Cameron and others got up to, of course, getting the fear factor going with constant commentary on the risks of terrorism and how terrible terrorist attacks would be. But this was ramping up the fear, bringing in Prevent, targeting children at school, Channel, so protecting vulnerable people from being drawn into terrorism. This was, in fact, more fear, more spying, and leading us through to MAPA, where we have groups across UK spying on individuals supposedly to keep us safe. And if I just end on this, we should also remember that Eric Pickles, former community minister, said we're going to shake up the balance of power in this country. We're going to change the nature of the constitution, be in no doubt about our commitment to localism. I know I look like an unlikely revolutionary, but the revolution starts here. And if people still don't get what the real intent of these people is, I'll just end here with Michael Gove. And he was quoted in 2014 as saying, so if the right candidate for any public appointment happens to be a member of the Revolutionary Communist Party or someone who has been generous enough to support a political party with their hard-earned cash, if they are the right person, then he or she will be appointed. That's the end of it. And on that note, let's come across to Mark. We can clearly show that people, in my mind, with a strong communist agenda were working to destroy Britain back in the 2013-2014 period. And I'm sure that they're still at the treasonous work today.